Anakin vs. Obi-Wan is a pivotal moment in the Star Wars story. Because of Anakin's arrogance, Obi-Wan is able to utilize the high ground and defeat Darth Vader. But what if instead, Anakin gained the high ground and ultimately killed Obi-Wan? Obi-Wan and Anakin's duel would begin and proceed as it did in The Revenge of the Sith. Anakin and Obi-Wan would nearly be evenly matched. But in our story, Anakin would have just a bit more patience. I think that if Anakin had been a bit more patient, he would have eventually defeated Kenobi. And in our story, this is what happens. Anakin would step from the hovering platform onto the rock just below Kenobi. Obi-Wan had the high ground, but instead of trying to demonstrate his power, Anakin would take it slower, keeping his guard up as he advanced up the rocky hill. Anakin pushed up toward Kenobi, and with powerful attacks, Anakin was able to turn Obi-Wan around and gain the high ground on him. This advantage, along with Anakin's rage, allowed him to deal a final blow to his former master. Anakin would leave Obi-Wan next to the lava to die. As Anakin returned to Padme's ship, Obi-Wan would be visited by Qui-Gon Jinn, who would quickly guide Obi-Wan through the process of maintaining his identity separate from the Force, the technique of becoming a Force ghost. Meanwhile, Anakin arrived at Padme's ship just as Palpatine was landing on Mustafar. In this story, the duel between Yoda and Palpatine would play out as normal, with Palpatine winning and Yoda going into exile. Still caring deeply for Padme, Anakin requests that she be flown to Palpatine's private medical facility on Coruscant. I see Padme's fate playing out a few different ways here. The first option is she would still lose the will to live and die in childbirth. The twins would be born, but this time they would be in Anakin's care rather than Obi-Wan's. The second scenario has Padme surviving. I think it's possible that after his victory with Obi-Wan, Anakin would no longer be insecure, and he would be able to have an even-tempered conversation with Padme when she woke up. This would make it easier for him to manipulate her into staying with him. I think this, combined with the high-end medical facility on Coruscant and a small will to live, Padme would survive. For the sake of this story, we're going to imagine this scenario. Luke and Leia are born on Coruscant under the watchful eye of Emperor Palpatine, who would only see them as a future replacement for Anakin when he became old and useless. Vader would see his two kids as future apprentices who would be able to defeat the Empire and rule the galaxy with him and their mother. It was the perfect scenario to Anakin. However, Padme would never be able to love Anakin the way she did before. His dark deeds and identity as Vader alienated her from Anakin, but she still believed there was good in him. For this reason, and for Luke and Leia's sake, Padme would remain with Anakin as he carried out the Emperor's will. Now, I think it's important to note that Palpatine would find a way to eliminate Padme so that Anakin would only be devoted to him. But he would patiently wait for the right opportunity, and this would take time. Because Anakin did not burn or lose his limbs on Mustafar, there would be nothing holding him back from becoming the most powerful Force user in the galaxy. Anakin would reach his full potential in the dark side. And because of this, even more so than in the original story, Sidious would always be on guard and would form many different contingencies if Lord Vader ever betrayed him. Eventually, Padme would begin to lose hope that the Anakin she loved would ever return, so she would begin thinking of ways to escape with Luke and Leia. In order to do this, she would need help from someone who knew the old Anakin just as well as she did. I think that if she had survived Mustafar, she would have become a key player in what would become the rebellion against the Empire, as well as maybe the redemption of Anakin Skywalker. But we'll get there. In our story, Obi-Wan was killed on Mustafar, so it was Anakin who took her with him. This would mean that he was there for the birth of Luke and Leia, and ultimately there to raise him in the dark side of the Force. Now this is where our story picks up. 15 years have passed since Obi-Wan and Anakin's duel on Mustafar. Padme has grown more and more disgusted by the power-hungry man that Anakin has become. But she's remained with him for the sake of Luke and Leia, who would be about 15 years old at this point. Under Vader's care, Luke and Leia are growing into deadly Sith assassins, even at their young age. Padme would grow to expect that Palpatine was looking for a chance to remove her from Anakin's life. But because Anakin would have such control over her life and even hold her almost as a prisoner, Palpatine would struggle to find an opportunity to kill her. But sensing this danger, Padme would work on an escape plan, as she was essentially being held prisoner by Anakin, though he would not view it that way. Eventually she would escape from Anakin and make contact with Bail Organa. Initially, Bail would be suspicious of Padme, either because he thought her to have died on Mustafar, or he would be aware that she was with Vader and thus worried about her being a spy. I think the first option makes the most sense. Eventually, Bail would trust her intentions and bring her in on the beginnings of the Rebel Alliance. Meanwhile, Anakin would become enraged that Padme had left him. This would lead him on a tear through the galaxy, killing and torturing anyone who may or would be connected to Padme. During Anakin's rage, he would start to hear Obi-Wan's voice repeating, "Anakin, you've become the very thing you swore to destroy." Kenobi would even begin to visit Anakin as a Force ghost. He would haunt Anakin as a literal ghost of his past, a reminder of his past dark deeds. Luke and Leia would accompany their father as he traveled the galaxy, slaughtering innocent people simply to numb the pain of losing Padme. Luke, being more like his mother, would grow increasingly uneasy at the sight of his father's killings. Luke was naturally more compassionate despite his efforts to suppress these feelings with the dark side. While Leia had grown to be more like Anakin with desire for power and a fear of losing control of the things she loved, Leia would viciously join her father in killing, while Luke would watch in growing horror at what his sister was becoming. While the light side began to pull at young Luke Skywalker, his sister Leia would fall further and further into the dark side. At this point, Leia would especially catch the attention of Emperor Palpatine, who had remained a distant figure up until this point. Darth Vader's bloody campaign would signify to Bail Organa that it was time to reach out to ones who could stop Vader and the twins. He would send Padme to make contact with his informant, Fulcrum, while he himself would dust off an old comlink. This comlink would connect him to Master Yoda. Joining with a small rebel cell, Padme would be brought before Fulcrum, who was in fact Ahsoka Tano. The two would embrace like old friends. Reminiscing would be short, as there was urgency in Padme's voice. She would request that Ahsoka help her reach Anakin. Now, at this point, Ahsoka doesn't quite know that Anakin is Vader, but Padme would explain the events surrounding Order 66 and the rise of the Empire from her perspective. Ahsoka would be heartbroken at what her old master had become, but she would agree to do whatever it took to save him. Now this leads us to the final part or confrontation of this story, and I think it can go many ways, as there's a lot of moving pieces. Anakin is being haunted by his former master and his deeds as Vader. There's conflict within Luke, and Leia is growing more and more powerful in the dark side. Meanwhile, Padme, Ahsoka, Yoda, and a Force ghost Obi-Wan would each play a part in the mission to save this dark trio of Skywalkers, or stop them. Anakin and the twins would continue to tear through the galaxy. Leia continued to grow more and more powerful in the dark side, while Luke would continue to grow more conflicted. Eventually, Luke would send an encrypted message to his mother Padme, who was growing more influential in the rebellion. Luke would tell her where they were headed next, Tatooine. He would tell Padme that his father was set on eliminating all slavers of his home planet. Padme and Ahsoka would travel to Tatooine, where they would hope to be there waiting for the Skywalker family. In the spaceport of Mos Eisley, the two would listen for any leads they could get on where the Skywalker trio would begin their slaughter. Padme would overhear a group of Toydarians speaking of what sounded like an underground slave market. She knew that this is where Anakin would begin. So Ahsoka and Padme would follow the Toydarians to an old cantina that was full of shifty characters from all around the galaxy. The two would wait in a corner, expecting that at any moment Anakin, Luke, and Leia would make a deadly appearance. And they sure did. Suddenly, the corner opposite to them lit up red, 3 lightsabers ignited. Almost instantly, Padme watched in horror as her daughter began to slash through a group of slavers. Not far behind was Anakin, but Luke remained behind, just holding his lightsaber. Padme would run toward her family, demanding that they stop the slaughter. And at the sound of her voice, Anakin would stop everything and run to her. Just like in the Revenge of the Sith, Anakin would see every dark deed he had done in the name of love for Padme. He would beg her to come back with them, and that everything was going to be okay. And even like Episode 3, he would promise that he could overthrow Palpatine. Luke would step into the conversation as well, hoping that he could also help convince his mother to return to them and that they could just be a family again. But Leia, who had gone beyond even Anakin in the dark side, would see Padme as a roadblock to the power she now craved, the power that she and her father could have. Leia began to force choke Padme. Freezing in horror at what was happening, Anakin would stand there, doing nothing. Begging his father to do something, Luke would leap in front of his mother and begin to duel Leia. At this point, Ahsoka would also ignite her lightsabers and join the fight. Leia was so strong that she was able to hold her own against Ahsoka and Luke, who were reserved in their attacks as they did not want to harm her, but Leia had no such weaknesses. Soon the tide would turn and Leia would become desperate to kill her attackers. She sent out a blast of lightning that would have impressed even Sidious had he witnessed it. The lightning would knock her brother and Ahsoka to the ground, stunning them. Seeing an opportunity to strike, Leia leapt forward with a killing strike directed at her brother. But Anakin's lightsaber was there to block it. Anakin would sternly tell Leia that they were beaten and it was time to go. With Padme slung over his shoulder, he would command Leia to retreat with him. Leia would see the anger in his eyes and obey. But in that moment, she would decide that her father was weak, and she would need a much stronger master to gain the power she desired. Ahsoka and Luke would watch as Anakin and Leia fled back to their Imperial shuttle. Padme was once again their prisoner. Anakin and Leia would return to Vader's palace on Coruscant, with Padme as their prisoner. Leia would watch and disgust as her father desperately sought the attention of her mother, who had clearly defected to join the rebels. Leia would not have the patience for her parents. She left them to head straight for the other palace on Coruscant, Emperor Palpatine's palace. Leia would seek out Palpatine's training. She would explain that because of her mother, Anakin would never be the apprentice he wanted, nor the master she wanted. She would go on to tell Palpatine that even if he could kill Padme, Vader would always know it was him who killed her. Hearing her plea, Palpatine would agree to train her directly as his new apprentice, but only if she succeeded in killing the rest of her family. Leia would agree to this price. Backed by a squad of elite purge troopers, Leia would storm Vader's palace on Coruscant. Leia would have the element of surprise and numbers in her favor. Now, in a fair fight, Darth Vader would destroy this dark-side Leia. But in our story, Leia's advantage will allow her to catch Anakin off balance. Leia would send several troopers to apprehend her mother, while she and the most elite troopers would face Anakin. While Leia circled her father, she would tell him that he had grown weak, and he was distracted by Padme. She would even plead with him to abandon Padme, and together they could overthrow the Emperor. You know, the typical dark side offer. Angry at his daughter's betrayal, Anakin would reach out with the Force and crush the throats of several purge troopers. Igniting his lightsaber, Anakin slashed through several more. But before Anakin's slaughter could continue, Leia demanded that he stop. Anakin would see Leia pointing her lightsaber at Padme's throat. The room would be silent, and in a merciless moment, Leia would use her lightsaber to strike down her own mother. And this would solidify Leia's deep dive into the dark side. Of course, this would enrage Anakin. He would attempt to kill everyone around him, but Leia expected this reaction, and already purged troopers were surrounding him. Leia would begin to use Force lightning to cripple her father. Now, I know there will be some of you that don't think it's possible for Leia to subdue Anakin like this. I hear ya. Ordinarily, I'd agree, but in this moment, Leia had the element of surprise and numbers to her advantage. And in addition to that, Anakin would be so caught off guard by Leia's betrayal and murder of Padme that he would not respond in powerful rage, but more of a defeated surprise. On the other side of the galaxy, Luke would feel his mother's death, and Leia's descent further into the dark side. Ahsoka would bring Luke back to the Alliance, where he would be met with skepticism. Ahsoka would assure everyone that Luke's only intentions were to stop Vader, Leia, and the Emperor. At this point, Luke and the rebels did not know that Anakin was being cast aside by the Emperor, and that his new apprentice was now Leia. Luke would gain the rebels' trust by providing information outlining the weak points of Coruscant. Luke would draw up a plan to infiltrate Coruscant and put an end to the dark reign of the Empire. Luke and Ahsoka would lead a strike team of commandos to Coruscant. Their goal would be a long shot, but with Luke's insider knowledge, they would attempt to capture or kill the Emperor. As their frigate flew through hyperspace, Ahsoka would be meditating in her private chambers. Hello there. She would turn to see the Force ghost of Obi-Wan Kenobi. Obi-Wan would tell Ahsoka that he had visited Anakin a number of times in the last few months. During these visits, he had felt the conflict within him. With Padme's death, it would be possible to bring Anakin into the fight against the Emperor. On Coruscant, Leia had taken over her father's palace, and Anakin was being held captive and barely alive. Devastated that Padme had been killed, Anakin's anger towards the Emperor would rise. Even though it was Leia who killed Padme, Anakin blamed Palpatine for turning his daughter against him. Anakin, it's not too late for you to make things right. Obi-Wan had been haunting Anakin for months now, and he was back. As Anakin sat in his cell, Obi-Wan would tell Anakin that Luke and Ahsoka were on their way to Coruscant to face the Emperor. He would tell them that if Anakin joined them, they might have a chance in stopping Palpatine, in making things right. This is what Padme would have wanted. Obi-Wan would disappear to leave Anakin with his thoughts, and he was now more conflicted than ever. Luke and Ahsoka's rescue of Anakin would go smoothly, as there were only stormtroopers and some Imperial guards protecting the ancient Mandalorian prison for Force users. Leia had discovered this trap while she was investigating a crash site from the Clone Wars with her father many years before. After cutting through the Imperial guards and freeing Anakin, Luke and Ahsoka plead with Anakin to help them stop Leia and Palpatine. It doesn't take much to convince Anakin to help, as he has already been conflicted after Leia's murder of Padme. Ahsoka, Anakin, and Luke head to the Imperial Palace to face Leia and Palpatine. Arriving at the palace, the three quickly move through their security forces and enter the throne room where Leia and Palpatine are waiting for them. Palpatine laughs at the sight of his former apprentice standing next to Luke and Ahsoka. Luke pleads for his twin sister to join them, but she only responds with a bolt of powerful Sith lightning directed right at Luke. But Luke is ready and stops the lightning with his lightsaber. Still full of anger, Anakin charges at Sidious, and Ahsoka quickly follows him. This leaves Luke and Leia to duel each other. The twins are evenly matched in skill, but as Leia channels her anger, she begins to overpower Luke with the dark side. And despite being a powerful duo, Anakin and Ahsoka are unable to get an edge on Palpatine. His speed and power in the dark side augment his abilities beyond theirs. Anakin looks across the room to see that Luke is struggling against Leia, so he tells Ahsoka to help him out. In his arrogance, Anakin believes he can kill the Emperor himself. Anakin is full of anger, and this anger would fuel his power. Palpatine would die today by his hands. This is the man who took everything from him. Palpatine is relishing Anakin's rage. He is finally seeing the full potential of Darth Vader's power. The power was suppressed because of Padme, but with her gone, only his kids prevented him from serving the dark side and him completely. So Palpatine resolved to kill everyone in the room beside Anakin. With lightning speed, Palpatine slices off Anakin's good arm and sends a blast of lightning that stuns him. The Sith Lord then leaps down to join Leia against Ahsoka and Luke. Only he has no intention of letting Leia survive. Normally Palpatine would have sat back and watched those who were inferior to him fight it out, but this was a matter that he wanted to end immediately. Palpatine threw his lightsaber into Leia's back. She suspected nothing, and instantly she collapsed to the ground. As if in the same motion, he used his second lightsaber to carve a deep cut in Ahsoka's back. This left Luke Skywalker alone against the Emperor. Laughing, Palpatine deactivated his lightsabers and began to send force lightning at Luke. He would kill Luke slowly. But at that moment, Palpatine felt a disturbance in the Force. A presence he had not felt since the first day of his empire. The presence had entered the room. An aged Yoda entered the throne room, and Palpatine stopped electrocuting Luke to face the old Jedi. The two masters begin to fight, but Yoda has grown older and more frail during his time on Dagobah. This is not an even fight like it was before. But soon, Luke picks himself up and joins Master Yoda. Together, the two would stand a better chance. With only his mechanical arm, Anakin slowly gets up and joins the fight against Palpatine. With Master Yoda and the two Skywalkers, the scale tips in their favor. The throne room is filled with blurs of light as the Force boosts the speed of each duelist. In his old age, Yoda's guard is momentarily let down as he stumbles. Palpatine seizes the opportunity to strike a killing blow on the old master. However, Luke intervenes, and Palpatine is only able to stun Yoda with a short blast of lightning. The duel is now father and son versus the Emperor. After several minutes of furious fighting, Luke and Anakin finally knock Palpatine to the ground. Luke wants to kill him then and there, but realizing the path to the dark side before him, Anakin stops him, realizing it's not the Jedi way. And though it's been a long time since he had been a Jedi, Anakin realizes that killing Palpatine would send his son back down the dark path he had barely escaped. But before Anakin could collect his thoughts, a flash of red zooms past Anakin and Luke. Leia's crimson blade had been thrown across the room and now lodged itself in Palpatine's chest. Anakin and Luke look back to see Leia barely standing. Her wound was fatal, and she had used every last bit of strength to throw her lightsaber at Palpatine. But Palpatine was dead. It was over. Anakin and Luke rushed over to her. She would tell Anakin and Luke that there was nothing she could do to make up for killing her mother. But she saw how foolish she was to align herself with Palpatine, and to betray her family was foolish as well. Leia died as Anakin told her that he understood how Palpatine could manipulate and twist people. Ahsoka was also unconscious, but alive. She would eventually recover from her wounds, as would Yoda. With the death of Sidious, the Empire would crumble and the rebellion would become the new Republic. Because of their past as Sith, Luke and Anakin would be received with hesitation. But over time, they would become respected Jedi in the new Republic, as they led the new Jedi Order together. Well guys, that's it for this story. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm sure there are things you would do differently, so please let me know in the comments below. I love seeing your guys' thoughts on these what-if scenarios, and as always, may the Force be with you.